The laughter echoed through the pilot's mess hall as Naz walked past the table of her fellow cadets. She kept her eyes forward, her meal tray steady in her hands, but the snickers followed her like shadows. Dragon-3, one of them whispered loud enough for her to hear. What kind of call sign is that for someone who's never even seen real combat? Raza looked up from his position near the viewport, watching the stars drift past the orbital training station. His jaw tightened as he saw Naz's shoulders stiffen. As her squadron leader, he'd assigned that call sign himself, and he knew exactly why it fit her perfectly. The others just couldn't see it yet. "Leave it alone, Qasim," Raza said quietly, his voice carrying the authority that had earned him respect among the Earth Defense Corps' elite pilot program. "Come on, Raza," Qasim continued, emboldened by his audience. "Dragon-3? She's barely passed basic flight sims. Half the instructors think she doesn't belong here." Naz finally turned, her dark eyes flashing with controlled fury. "The instructors who matter know exactly where I belong," she said, her voice steady as steel. The mess hall fell silent. Even Qasim seemed to realize he'd pushed too far. Naz had scored higher on tactical assessments than anyone in their class, but her unconventional flying style had made some of the old guard instructors uncomfortable. She didn't fly like the textbooks taught. She flew like something wild and untamed. That's exactly why Raza had chosen her for his squadron. 3 days later, the alarms shattered the pre-dawn quiet of the station. Red lights bathed the corridors as pilots scrambled toward their fighters. The hegemony had finally made their move. A massive assault fleet had emerged from hyperspace near Mars, heading straight for Earth. "This is not a drill," Commander Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. "All squadrons to immediate launch. Humanity's survival depends on what happens in the next 6 hours. Raza strapped himself into his fighter's cockpit, running through pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. Around him, the launch bay buzzed with controlled chaos as dozens of Earth's finest pilots prepared for what might be their final battle. "Dragon Squadron, sound off," he called over the comm. "Dragon-2 ready," came the calm reply from his wingman, Torres. A pause, then quieter but no less determined. "Dragon-3 ready." Raza smiled grimly. Whatever doubts the others had about Naz, he had none. He'd seen her fly in the simulators, watched her pull maneuvers that defied both physics and common sense. She didn't just pilot her fighter, she became one with it. The launch bay doors opened, revealing the starfield beyond. In the distance, the red glow of Mars looked ominous, surrounded by the advancing dots of enemy ships. "Dragon Squadron, you are cleared for launch," came the tower's voice. They shot out into space in perfect formation, joining the hundreds of other human fighters forming up for the largest space battle in their species' history. The hegemony fleet was massive, sleek, predatory ships that had conquered dozens of worlds across the galaxy. "Incoming transmission," Torres reported. "The aliens are broadcasting on all frequencies." The voice that filled their headsets was cold, mechanical, translated by their computers. "Humans, you have been judged inferior. Your resistance is illogical. Surrender, and your deaths will be swift." Raza's grip tightened on his controls. "Dragon Squadron, ignore the propaganda. Focus on the mission." The two fleets closed with each other at tremendous speed. The first exchange of fire lit up the void like deadly fireworks. Human plasma bolts met alien energy beams in brilliant explosions that painted the darkness in blues and reds. "Dragon-2 to Dragon-1, Torres called out, strain evident in his voice. "These ships are faster than our intel suggested. I can't get a lock." Around them, human fighters were falling. The alien ships moved with fluid grace that made them nearly impossible to target. For every hegemony ship destroyed, 3 human fighters were vaporized. Then Naz's voice came across the comm, calm as death itself. "Dragon-1, requesting permission to break formation." Raza watched his tactical display as another squadron was decimated by a pack of alien interceptors. They were losing badly. "Dragon-3, explain your plan." "No plan, sir. Just flying." Something in her voice made Raza's decision for him. "Dragon-3, you are cleared for independent action." What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. Naz's fighter suddenly dove toward the largest enemy ship, not in the careful, calculated approach taught by their instructors, but in a wild, spiraling attack run that seemed completely insane. Alien defensive fire filled the space around her, but somehow she danced through it untouched. "Dragon-3, what are you doing?" Torres called out in alarm, but Raza understood now. He watched as Naz's fighter moved like something alive, like something that belonged in the void between stars. She wasn't following human tactics, she was creating something entirely new. Her plasma bolts found their mark, punching through the alien ship's shields at impossible angles. The massive vessel shuddered and began to list. All fighters observe Dragon-3's approach pattern, Raza commanded. Adapt and overcome. Other human pilots began to mimic Naz's wild flying style, abandoning rigid formations for fluid, unpredictable attacks. The aliens, who had based their strategy on defeating conventional human tactics, suddenly found themselves facing something they couldn't compute. "Control tower to all squadrons," came the voice from the station. "Unknown fighter is single-handedly disrupting enemy formation. Identify pilot for commendation." Raza smiled as he watched Naz's fighter dart between two enemy ships, somehow managing to get them to fire on each other. "Control tower, that's Dragon-3, pilot named Naz Qureshi." A pause from the tower. Then, "Dragon-3, you are cleared for battle. Show them what humanity can do." And she did. By the time the battle ended, the hegemony fleet was in full retreat. Naz had personally destroyed 7 enemy ships and saved dozens of human fighters with her unconventional tactics. Later, in the debriefing room, Qasim approached her with his head down. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Naz looked at him with those fierce dark eyes. "No, you don't. You just didn't understand what Dragon-3 means." "What does it mean?" he asked. Raza answered for her. "It means she's the third dragon humanity has ever produced. The other 2 are in the history books, legendary pilots who changed everything when we needed them most." Naz smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from her in weeks. The aliens learned something today. They learned that humans don't just fight to survive. We fight to become something more than we were yesterday. As the stars wheeled slowly past the viewport, the scattered remnants of the hegemony fleet continued their retreat toward the edge of the solar system. They had come to conquer what they thought was an inferior species. They had met dragons instead,